Don't slip up or get caught.
Why not, man?
I'm coming for that number one.
A good Tuesday afternoon to you all, and welcome. This is the Seth Joyner Show. A lot going on with our Philadelphia Eagles. They fall to the Arizona Cardinals. I believe it was 26-33 last week. The offense got off to a rough start, but then, found its footing midway through the third quarter. And defense, I thought, played pretty darn good. I mean, when the defense can create 3 turnovers, something they haven't been able to do in quite some time, I thought that was a big deal. But nonetheless, the Eagles fall short. The controversy continues to swirl around this team as far as the quarterback is concerned. And we're going to dive into, Carson Wentz. We're going to dive into Jalen Hurts and how well he is playing and how he's coming along. I got some videos for you guys today. We're going to dive into a little bit of Doug Peterson, a little bit of Jim Schwartz, and of course, we've got to dive into Howie Roseman after the vote of confidence from Jeffrey Lurie last week. But to help me today is one of my colleagues now. He's a writer, sports writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Very opinionated, so I think you guys are going to really like him, like hearing what he has to say today. I'm going to try to, keep my commentary to a minimum and let him have the stage as much as I possibly can. But y'all know I like to talk. Joining me today is Mr. Marcus Hayes. Marcus, how you doing, my friend?
I'm well, Seth. How you doing?
All good. So let's jump in it right away. I guess the 800-pound gorilla in the room is a report that came out unceremoniously right before the Eagles took the field against the Arizona Cardinals last week. That Carson Wentz has basically said to the Eagles brass, the Eagles franchise, that he doesn't want to be a backup to Jalen Hurts, and if that's going to be the case, that he wants out. Adam Schefter actually broke the story, and it just caused a groundswell of reactions last week, especially with it leading up to the game and the pressure that it all of a sudden put on the rest of the team and the rest of the players. Give me your opinion about it, and then let's dive into it a little deeper, because I had some very pointed thoughts that people kind of attacked me over as well.
Well, the first thing that resonated for me was, where did the story come from? Does it make sense that it comes from Philadelphia? Well, maybe the Eagles are trying to sow some dissent. But I know Adam. I've known Adam since he was a reporter in Denver covering, Terrell Davis and those great teams. And he's very well connected with agents. And so I called Carson's agent and I said, I'd like to talk about the provenance of the story. And I didn't get a call back. And that indicated to me that not only was the story legitimate, but that's where it came from. Because if you're a player, I mean, my understanding is that a player, especially in his second contract, understands that the agent works for him.
Right.
So anything that agent does, anything that any of his representatives do, his family, he's in control of that. So number one, I'm certain at this point it came from Carson Wentz. I believe that's how he feels. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I believe that that's where it came from. The second thing was, being around players for 30 years now, it's a team sport. I mean, you don't say, this is how I want my thing to go, number one, next year at the expense of everyone else, even though it's going to destroy the salary cap and might affect the other players that you can have around you. But number two, on the day of a game, when you're still, it's essentially a playoff game. If you lose this game and Washington wins, you're done. So it ignores the importance of the moment. And in football, unlike more than any other sport, every single game might be your last. So you're telling Fletcher Cox that this might be his last game, and you're going to mess with Jalen Hurts, the quarterback's head. Not that I think Jalen Hurts was affected, but you're going to put this out there, this bomb with 3 games left, and this coaching staff, which is in peril. So those are the two things that resonated most for me. And I was very disappointed in Carson. I've known Carson since, before he got drafted. And I think that he's just in a bad place right now. I think he's frustrated, and I think he's angry. I think he's frustrated with himself. I think he's angry with himself. But I also think he's frustrated with his coaching staff, and I think he's frustrated with the front office and ownership.
Well, one of my viewers, Theodore Nicholas, he you can see the comments over in your right hand corner. He says, on the real, I got to hear it from Carson's mouth. All that he said, she said. Now, listen, I played in the NFL for a long time, and I agree. Players get to a point where they really understand that my agent, my representation, they represent me. So there's nothing that's coming out. There's nothing that's going to be said that's not verified, okayed, and co-signed by me. Okay. So if this came out, it might not be 100% true. That's why I always say, when I hear something, when I read something, it might not always be 100% true. But where there's smoke, there's fire. I think we're beginning to see that when you go back to the Joseph Santo Loquito story last offseason or 2 off seasons ago, and people tried to poo-poo that and some of the comments that were made. And yes, Carson had a whole lot of supporters on the team. There are guys that are going to be loyal to him because they've been there with him. I get that. But I said, people asked me then, is there any validity to this story? I said, listen, where there's smoke, there's fire. And when stuff like this gets out, there is someone that wants that information to get out, okay? If they didn't want it to get out, then they wouldn't say it. And even though people don't like, silent collaborators, if you will, silent sources. Listen, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but they've also got to protect their job and protect their family's well-being as well. So you want somebody to come out and say something negatively about a situation, but you don't realize that the two people you really don't mess with on a football team is the head coach and the quarterback. You just don't mess with those two guys. Right. So if you're not saying something positive, you keep your mouth shut. But I just think that where there's smoke, there's fire. And I talked about it in post game, and a lot of people didn't get the if. I said, if this is true, then I don't give a rat's what about Carson Wentz's feelings. Nobody cares. Listen, the Eagles, and you see all these stories, Dan Ozlowski is talking about how the Eagles organization didn't support Carson. I said, stop it, man. Listen, they traded up, they moved up to the number 2 spot to draft this kid. Who wouldn't love to be drafted number 2? That's the first thing. Overall, okay? And then last year, they re-upped him, gave him $128 million extension, okay? When he came here, they were going to sit him. They moved Sam Bradford and gave him the starting job, okay? After every injury that he's endured, he stepped right back into the fray as the starter. Now you tell me, what else does the Eagles organization owe this kid besides what they've already given him? And what does he owe them in return when you're looking at how he's played this year? Well,
to your point, okay, if you say, okay, they've invested a lot in him, but what have they put around him? If that's Dan Orlovsky's, contention, well, he can't trust him because they haven't invested around him. Well, they drafted Andre Dillard in the first round to play left tackle for the next 10 years. They extended Lane Johnson. They extended Brandon Brooks. They acquired and extended Brandon Brooks. They extended Jason Kelce. They extended, they re-signed Jason Peters last year. They drafted Jalen Rieger. They drafted Dallas Goedert. They extended Zach Ertz. All they've done over and over again at the expense of the defense is give Carson Wentz weapons. That's all they've done. Now, the weapons might not be as good as they panned out to be, but they have done everything they can to support Carson Wentz, both financially, long-term after his injuries, and trying to build a team around him. Miles Sanders, second-round pick last year. They keep drafting high offensive players that directly influence and enhance Carson Wentz. So they haven't done anything around him stuff. No, they missed on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside as opposed to DK Metcalf. Well, so did Bill Belichick. So he drafted a receiver before DK Metcalf. So a lot of people missed on DK Metcalf, and I wouldn't have missed on DK Metcalf. I thought but you know what? I'd have probably missed on 100 other guys over the last 10 years. My point is, this narrative that the Eagles have not reinforced Carson Wentz with weapons is ridiculous. Deshaun Jackson is here. Alshon Jeffrey is here because of Carson Wentz. Now, you can argue maybe they shouldn't have given Alshon his second extension to ameliorate the salary cap, which kept them from being able to land DeAndre Hopkins in a very unexpected trade scenario. All that said, they've done a lot to help Carson Wentz move forward. Carson Wentz, who's been injured to some degree every single year, including the year before he was drafted. So this narrative that the Eagles have betrayed him or the Eagles undercut him, I mean, Jalen Hurts was drafted as an injury insurance policy. They expected to be ready 2 or 3 months into the season, and he just was better than they thought.
Right.
And Carson Wentz was worse.
So I'll say this because, people are still going to, they're still going to come after you for those comments because a lot of those players, they're going to be like, well, all those players are bums. Listen, if you're a GM, you're going to miss on some draft picks, okay? But the thing about draft picks, and granted, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is not DK Metcalf, but the question is, what can you get out of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? Because when you get drafted, that's just the beginning.
That's right.
No player comes into the NFL, Marcus, with the wherewithal to be a great player because there's a transition period. It was even more so during my day than it is now, but there's still a transition period. Okay. So what made me a better football player out of college, a couple of years down the road in the pros than I was in the college? Coaching. I got development. I got coaches that taught me how to read blocking schemes. I got coaching that taught me, route combinations and zone coverage. I got coaching that taught me how to efficiently and effectively cover tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers in man-to-man scenarios. When I watch the Philadelphia Eagles players, it's one thing to draft a player. It's another thing to have the wherewithal and the ability from a coaching standpoint to have coaches that can not only teach X's and O's, but can teach the basic fundamentals, the basic technique, and the basic principles of playing a position, okay? And when you're playing good old boy, buddy, if I get a job, I'll bring you along. If you get a job, you bring me along. If you're playing that kind of business as a coach, then that means you're not getting the best available coach that's available out there to help you develop your players, okay? Because listen, Marcus, let's be honest. I can sit you down at a chalkboard and I can teach you the 46 defense backwards and forwards. And in a year, you'd understand it backwards and forwards, okay? Does that mean that you can coach a linebacker? Absolutely not. And I experience coaches like that in the NFL on every level all the time. They can talk the lingo. They can talk concepts. That's their phrase word. Oh, it's this concept and it's that concept. Okay, but I'm looking at the players and it's not translating with the players because they can't teach them how to play the game of football.
Well, it's detail, right? It's detail. It's being disciplined and being professional, and it's footwork, and it's putting your body at the proper angle. It's film work, preparing for this quarterback's tendencies or this running back's tells, and that's the genius of coaching. That's when you got a guy. And one of the biggest things that I think affected the Eagles when Frank Reich and John DeFilippo left the team, they promoted Mike Groh from receivers coach to offensive coordinator. Mike Groh in 5 years might be the world's greatest offensive coordinator somewhere. I tell you this, though, he was one of the best receivers coaches they've ever had. He was when they made him offensive coordinator, they lost a very good receivers coach. And then they replaced him with a college guy who didn't know what he was doing, only lasted a year. And if you look at the position at this point, that is the position that has suffered the most since they won the Super Bowl, receivers coach. And again, Mike Groh, like John DeFilippo, was fanatical about detail. fanatical about it. And you know who else is pretty fanatical about it? God bless him, is Press Taylor, Carson Wentz's coach. But you got to allow yourself to be coached as well. And that's my greatest issue with Carson. I know Press Taylor is telling him the right things to do. But Carson, I just don't think he's listening. And I don't think that he believes he needs to do it that. You look at the development of Baker Mayfield, just on a simple rollout to the right versus Carson Wentz rolling out to the right. Not on a rollout, but a scramble to the right. He's escaped the pocket. He's going to the right. And you look at the footwork and the shoulders of Baker Mayfield versus Carson Wentz right now, and it's night and day. It's just night and day. And Carson's got a spectacular gift, a set of talent, a skill set. But you got to be able to do it right. At this point, he should be doing almost everything right, and he's not.
Well, I mean, then that leads to, and I don't want to dwell totally on Carson, but it's worth talking about because, what came out. Because I do want to get to Jalen Hurts and talk about all the good things that he's done and give him some props. But what you're talking about is a lot of things, that have been whispered around the Eagles organization since Carson Wentz has got here. Hey, dude is selfish. We've seen this year the lack of self-accountability. Doug Peterson has had to ask him or chide him or admonish him to go in front of his team and accept some of the responsibility. For someone who doesn't do that, for a player who can't do that, that is a player who can't get better, Marcus. It's just like anything else in life, okay? If I can't admit that I'm doing something wrong, if I can't admit that I got something wrong, how can I ever get better when I can't see the fault, okay?
It's true.
It's not just, and you got to be able to own that and accept that. And you can't lead. You can try to push Carson Wentz out there to lead this football team all you want. But even though he's up here, I mean, realistically, let's talk about this. Let's think about this. Okay. The quarterback gets paid more than any other player on the team. He's told he's the most important player on the team. I talked about it a little while ago. The two guys you don't mess with is the head coach and the quarterback. Okay. So the coach can walk around talking about how, everybody's the same. We treat everybody the same. Okay. I learned a long time ago that's a bunch of BS. The quarterback in every organization sits here, and everybody else falls in the pecking order down below, okay? A quarterback's ability to lead is his ability to know that this is where he is, but be willing to come down here, to meet the other players here, to the point where they want to go out and lay it all on the line for him. Now, when I watch Carson Wentz play, I don't see offensive linemen and running backs and wide receivers picking him up off the ground. I see him do it with Jalen Hurts. I see him do it with Nick Foles. See, that kind of stuff, Marcus, that kind of stuff I watch because that's a telltale sign of how much you like that guy, how much that guy is leading you, and how much you really believe in him.
And that's human nature. I mean, I'll put it to you this way, like the quarterbacks I've seen, and not just quarterbacks, but like point guards, quarterbacks, centermen in hockey, the guys that I found to be the best leaders are the ones that are most coachable. The coach tells them to do something, and sometimes before the coach tells them to do something, they make a correction. It's like being a coach on the field or whatever. And one of the things that, and I think we were talking about this before we went on air, is you look around the league and you see guys like Sidney Jones or Rasul Douglas or LJ Fort or Jordan Hicks or Nelson Aguilar experiencing success after a couple of years of struggling here. And my greatest issue with Doug as a coach, and I think he's a great motivator, I think he's a skilled offensive coach, is that word you used, accountability. These players don't hold each other accountable anymore. I think they did for about a year, and I think they did especially when Malcolm Jenkins was here. And I don't believe that Carson's demeanor, Carson's coachability projects well to others. They might not have an assistant coaching problem. They might have a culture problem that starts at the top. And I know this sounds like I'm blaming everything on Carson Wentz, but there's no other position in sports like quarterback on an NFL team, especially an NFL team that's supposed to have a franchise quarterback who's young and is building and expected to be great. So I don't know. And again, I don't think Carson Wentz is a lost cause. I think Carson Wentz does the things that he thinks are right in his mind, and he thinks he's a good person. And I think he's a good person, but he's a young person, and he's an inexperienced person. And I hope for his sake, and maybe the Eagles' sake down the road, that he takes that next step as a person to become a better player and a better man and the kind of leader that I think he probably could be one day.
Question. Do you think that Carson can become that here? Do you think that he can grow here? Do you see that happening?
I don't think that Carson has ever been humbled before. I don't think he's ever been embarrassed before. I believe that is the thing that needed to happen with Carson. He's always been the biggest fish in a small pond. And when he came here, starting as a rookie, that was a bonus. I mean, like you said, if Teddy Bridgewater doesn't tear his knee up, Carson Wentz doesn't play as a rookie because Sam Bradford is here to play in Carson's spot. The only person in the organization thought Carson was ready to play was Frank Reich. And Frank Reich did not hold sway. Frank Reich almost got fired after his first season. So he thought Carson was ready to play as a rookie. But to answer your question, yeah, I think at some point Carson Wentz is going to be that person. And maybe this incident, this episode is what gets him to that point. I hope so, because there's a lot there.
Well, I mean, the question is, though, Marcus, can it happen? Because when a guy's running from competition like we hear, okay, if your statement is, and listen, I'm just sharing with you guys what it is that, we've heard. Okay. We heard that Carson Wentz doesn't want to be the backup. He doesn't want to, hold a clipboard. He wants to be the guy. Okay. And I've said it week after week after week on my show, on pre and post game, on social media. The NFL is about competition. If a guy doesn't want to stay here, if Carson Wentz doesn't want to stay here and compete against Jalen Hurts next summer, and I think that's what it should look like. I don't think that the Eagles should give him an out because you've got too much invested in him.
Right.
Okay. If Jalen Hurts continues to play the way that he's playing, you bring them both back next year. Okay. You let them compete in training camp for the starting job, and the best man wins. And if Carson doesn't like that, then if I'm a GM or I'm a head coach anywhere, I don't want that guy on my team.
Absolutely.
Because you have to be willing, and the quarterback is the only position on the field where quarterbacks don't, if you're a top 10, top 15 draft pick, you don't have to compete. The job is automatically yours.
Right.
Okay? Is Jalen Reagor the best offensive weapon we have on the field? We were talking about it before we came on air. Looks to me like Quez Watkins has got, a heck of a lot more juice than Jalen Reagor right now. Okay. Fulgham, they pushed him in the background, in order to give Alshon Jeffrey more playing time. Here's a guy that's still, after 2.5, 3 weeks of not playing, still leading all your wide receivers in receiving yards and touchdowns. Okay. So all of these things, it comes down to competition. And the politics of football is the thing that bugs me the most, because don't tell me that football is a meritocracy when you sit back and you watch some of this BS that goes on and Carson's upset because he don't want to be, man, shut up. Aaron Rodgers, they didn't just draft a quarterback in the first round. They moved up and got one in the first round. And what did Aaron Rodgers do? He was like, watch me cook.
Yep, I'm going to be MVP.
So now the thought is that, you know what, hey, Carson Wentz is upset because they drafted Jalen Hurts. I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious right now?
I mean, and here's the other thing, right? If I'm Aaron Rodgers and I'm 38 years old or 36 years old or whatever, I kind of understand they're doing what they do to me, what they did with me to Brett Favre.
Right.
So you understand it. You can be upset, whatever. But that team we thought at the time had a lot more holes than the Brett Favre team. This Eagles team we thought at the time had a lot of holes. However, and Carson is young. However, Carson has missed time, and it's a team game. You win with everybody's effort. And if Jalen Hurts is going to be a Taysom Hill element in your offense, Carson, welcome him. If Jalen Hurts is going to be the guy that gets the Eagles through weeks 8, 9, and 10 when your knee's acting up and you can't play or your shoulder's acting up, welcome him. Winning is so hard in any team sport. And all you want is weapons. Because you know as well as I do, in football, especially in the NFL, no guaranteed contracts. Everybody gets paid when you win. You can have the greatest season ever, but, everybody gets paid when you win. So win. It doesn't matter how you win. Just win. And it's funny, like, Nick Foles and Carson Wentz are similar in a lot of ways, except Nick Foles, everything he says, he lives. He really, really, really wants Carson Wentz to do well with him holding the clipboard because Nick Foles wants the team to win the game. I don't know if Carson Wentz is that evolved yet. And I don't know if he's ever going to be, but he needs to be to help this team now and to be valuable to another team later.
Listen, man, that is some pretty pointed stuff when you think about it in those terms. And that tells you a lot about why and how, not only the city, but a lot of the guys that played with Nick Foles feel the way or felt the way that they felt towards him. Listen, I heard the rumblings even when Carson was hurt during the Super Bowl season. Things that guys said, little things that were creeping out along the way. He's got to grow up, but I listen. I want to talk about this other kid that's growing up right before our eyes. Listen, You guys are watching the Seth Joyner show with my guest today, Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Marcus, I want to give my viewers two different videos today, just to give them some understanding of what Jalen Hurts is seeing. I got one video that I break down and talk about, what happened on the safety, because somebody came at me, that's not Carson Wentz's fault. It was the protection this time when Carson did it. You didn't have that to say. It wasn't the protection when Carson got sacked for a safety. I want to show you the difference because Carson dropped back. He's in the pocket. He's standing in the end zone with no internal clock that, hey, I'm standing in the end zone. I got to get rid of this ball. My breakdown will show you why, whether Jalen Hurts took that sack or whether he threw it away, it was going to be a safety anyway because he had no out because of how the protection broke down. And then I want to show a play where people talk about the offensive line. The offensive line isn't always bad. The protection isn't always bad. But one thing you get Jalen Hurts that will stand in the pocket with guys around him, poised, cool, calm, and collected, making throws, anticipatory throws, even in the midst of pressure. So my producer Tom, I want to run the safety video first, and then as soon as that one's over, we're gonna go right into the pass to Dallas Goedert, and they're self-explanatory. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about those. All right, guys, I wanted to break down this play for you. It's 3rd and 8 rather. This is the play Jalen Hurts takes the safety. A couple of things to watch. When you're watching the routes against blitz, no one's breaking their routes off. You look at Zach Ertz in the slot at the top, Alshon Jeffrey at the top, and then you got Jalen Reagor down here at the bottom, and no one is running a site-adjusted route. The problem is the Cardinals are showing blitz at the top, but they're really coming at the bottom. So they've tricked the protection, and they've got Jason Kelce to set the protection to the left where the blitz is actually coming to the offense's right. And they don't have enough guys to pick it up. The Eagles are going to have 6 guys in protection with Dallas Goedert stepping down into the box. But the Cardinals are actually going to bring 7 guys on the blitz. And that means that somebody's going to be open. This safety right here at the bottom of the screen is creeping down. Good job by them disguising into the clock. You can see it's 3 seconds left on the play clock. And when the ball is snapped here, Jalen Hurts is just dead to rights. I mean, they've got him in the pocket. Like I said, everyone's releasing. And what kind of sight adjustment do you see here? Everyone's jammed. Everyone's manned up. Jalen Hurts has nowhere to go with the ball. And as this safety continues to come unblocked, there's not enough guys to pick him up. So he's the extra guy, and he comes wide open. Hassan Reddick does a great job of just containing it. And whether he throws this ball away or takes the sack, it's going to be a safety one way or the other. Okay? The problem is first and second down, they haven't gotten enough yards, which puts them in a third down situation, which allows the defense to be aggressive here. And Jalen Hurts has no other choice but to throw this ball away. And it's 2 points for the Arizona Cardinals. Now, if the Eagles don't figure out a way to start making better usage of first down and second down plays with a young quarterback, you're going to continue to see teams come after Jalen Hurts. And honestly, that's the one area. If I could find one area in his game where he struggled, just look up his passing percentage, his completion percentage, how he's performed under pressure versus blitzes. And the way that you solve that is being much more efficient in your play calling and your productivity on first and second down. A lot of good things here across the board for us to take a look at. Not only the throw in anticipation by Jalen Hurts, but I want you to also look at the protection by the offensive line. Has not always been bad. Miles Sanders has missed some blitz pickups, but he does a good job here. And this look you see, this eagle look, this bear look, you see this 5-man line. The Eagles are going to see a lot of this because of all the guys that they're missing in the starting lineup. So you're going to get man on blocking across the board. They're trying to get Kelsey singled up, and they're trying to get Matt Pryor, who in my opinion had a horrible game. They're trying to get him matched up one-on-one with Hassan Reddick, who the previous week had 5 sacks in a game and 3 caused fumbles. But what you'll see here on the snap of the ball, man blocking across the board. Everybody's one-on-one. And I'm going to go slow here because I want you to not only see Jalen Hurts' eyes, and as he goes through his progression, anything deep, he can see that the DBs are on top on the outside, the 2 receivers on the outside, so he knows he has nothing there. And then his eyes goes to Dallas Goedert here. But I want you to continue to watch throughout this entire play the protection. Okay? Everybody's blocking well. He's got a pocket. The only thing I'd like to see Miles Sanders do is step up here and meet Jordan Hicks in this hole so the pocket doesn't collapse and Jalen doesn't get a hand on a helmet here. You can see he gets kind of collapsed a little bit. But look at Jalen stand in this pocket and just deliver this strike here. Good timing, good accuracy, good throw. Look at the anticipation. Now, the ball's out of his hands. You really can't see it, but that ball's out of his hands before Dallas Goedert even comes out of his break here. And Dallas does a good job coming back for the ball, catches the ball short of the line, makes a good move on the linebacker here, and picks up the first down. Good play across the board by all 11. That's not something that you see with the Eagles offense all the time. And that wasn't, their most explosive play. That wasn't their best play. But I wanted to break that one down so everybody can see that the offensive line sometimes plays well. The quarterback sometimes makes good reads. And Miles Sanders, like I said, who struggled in pass coverage this year, he's doing a better job. He's just got to be more aggressive, stepping up at the point of attack and taking on Jordan Hicks instead of letting Jordan run through him. Good play. Good play by all 11. So, Marcus, I love doing these little breakdowns because it gives people a little more in-depth look at what is really going on and what's transpiring on the play. Because, when you're watching football from an entertainment value, from an entertainment view, there's a lot that you can miss, And, I mean, I'm just picking, plays that I think would make sense. The safety, there was nothing he could do there. I mean, sometimes the defense just wins. The problem is it's 3rd and 8, and you're in your minus red zone. I mean, you just can't do that.
Well, you know what's interesting about that play in the moment and since, I think that, and I didn't get to ask him this question yet. I think Jalen Hurts thought he was outside the tackle box. He was, and if the official hadn't called intentional grounding, there was an argument that he was outside the tackle box. At least his arm was. And I'm not sure how the rule goes. I don't know if your whole body has to be outside or not, but he was even with the right tackle. You saw him slide a little bit to his right. I think he thought he was outside the tackle box, and that's why he threw it away the way he did. Even so, throwing it away means you're not fumbling. There's worse things to do in the world than take a safety. You know, and he thought he was making the proper play. You could see it in his head. He was astounded that he was getting flagged because he had lost sort of track where the tackle box was. Because if you throw it away outside the tackle box and get it past the line of scrimmage, it's not grounding, even if you don't have a receiver there. But yeah, it's funny. You pull that Dallas Goedert tape. That's my favorite play Jordan or Jalen Hurts has made this season. It was in the moment. It was in the film study that I did yesterday and today, because that's how you play quarterback in the NFL. Russell Wilson, I think it is. I love these next-gen stats. What is it? Yardage is, amount of separation. There is no separation there. Right. But if you got a physical advantage and leverage on a receiver, you don't need separation to be able to make a play. If you're a second-round pick as a tight end, you should be able to make that play the reception 9 times out of 10, and the quarterback has to give you the chance to make it. We saw this with Donovan too, though. If you have a big arm and you think that you don't need much time, you're very reluctant to not throw to open guys. And the big issue with Carson, the big issue with Donovan is they don't hit guys in stride, and they don't throw guys open, and they don't anticipate because they don't need to. Because with their release and with their velocity, they can get it there anyway. Well, by then the defense is reacted, but we saw the advantage of throwing a guy open. The defense is trying to recover and react, and it missed a tackle. And that's what you see with Jalen Hurts that you don't see very often with Carson and didn't see with Donovan.
Well, I think, part of what you see, part of the issue is, the transition from the college game to the pro game. That's why I'm so astounded by these timing routes that Jalen throws. When you're in college, what really winds up happening is when you're playing these high-powered offenses, you have all day to throw the ball. You get to pick and choose. You get to wait to see if a guy is all the way open before you throw the ball. Some of these offenses require, just pinpoint accuracy and efficiency from the standpoint that, 1, 2, 3, the ball's got to be out of your hand. I know Doug said something this week about a play where Jalen didn't get the ball out in the 3-step drop, one of the sacks that he had taken. Okay. Well, hell, Carson Wentz has been doing that all year. You're not going to tell me that every single 3 and 5-step drop, that the quarterback gets it out on time, but for the most part, that's what makes offenses efficient. That's the difference between the pro game and the college game. The pro game, you got a split second to get that ball out of your hand. That's why timing is so essential. Because guys are so fast, they're going to close the window. They're going to close the gap. Because they're faster and they're technically better. They know how to close that window. At the college level, it's different. People always say, oh, Tim Tebow, he could never play quarterback. He was the worst. No. You want to know what Tim Tebow's problem was? Nobody ever taught Tim Tebow how to throw the ball with timing. He threw one pass that I can remember at the pro level with timing. And you want to know which one that was? The pass he threw in overtime for Denver in the playoff game. And I forget who the wide was. Demaryius Thomas catches it and takes it for a touchdown because he threw it on time. Okay. And it's not Tim Tebow's fault, because think about it. He grew up in that little read option offense where they run the ball for 200-300 yards a game. And when he went play action pass, he could pick and choose who he wanted to throw the ball to. So if somebody could have ever taught him how to throw the ball on rhythm and on time, okay, he might have had somewhat of an NFL career. But because he never could get that concept, he always had to wait for people to be open, okay, it destroyed him. Now, that's where Carson's got to get to. And I don't care whether you got to do it in the off season or when it's the defense's period during the season, you got to go over on field 3 or 4 and figure it out. But if you don't get that timing down with your wide receivers at the pro level, you're just not going to have time to get the ball to guys. All right. And to your point, where you talked about Groh being a great wide receivers coach, opposed to the last 2 or 3 guys that they've had, my problem with the routes that the wide receiver run, they just run routes. They don't set up routes. They don't stem at the top of the routes. They don't make a DB think that they're going to go inside and then out. They just run out. So it's real easy for these guys to cover. And it makes it that much harder for Carson or any other quarterback to complete passes.
Especially when the playbook hasn't really matured since 2017. You can kind of anticipate what's going on. And, I guess to some degree that's on Doug, and to some degree that's on the turnover at the offensive coordinator position. So they brought in 2 fresh offensive minds, and Marty Mornhinweg and Rich Gangarella. But I don't know that that's sort of, what do you call it? I don't know that that's taken root. You show that play, and that play is probably the best. The Goddard completion is probably the best example of the sort of advanced level that Jalen Hurts can play at. Not on every play, not every series, but can play at. But it also sort of triggers this thing that I've seen him throw 70 balls now, and I've seen him drop back maybe 75, 80 times. He doesn't remind me as much of Russell Wilson, which is one comp, or Lamar Jackson, as he does Drew Brees. He just feels what's going to happen, and he's completely calm, and he doesn't need a huge arm to be productive. Drew Brees has never had a huge arm. He's not a big guy, but he runs his offenses the way Chris Paul runs his offenses in the NBA. He has everybody kind of on a string. And I see that with Jalen, even in 2 starts. And that may change. I might be wrong. But he's comfortable doing the right thing. But he reminds me a little bit of a more athletic, a little bit more conservative Nick Foles, who did the same thing. When Nick Foles was running the offense, he ran the offense. I don't know if it was you or somebody else I saw last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago. There was a play. I guess it was last week the play worked, the week before it didn't. There was a play where Carson had the opportunity to hit, it might have been Brian Baldinger. He had the opportunity to hit Jalen Reagor on a crossing route. He also had the opportunity to get Boston Scott manned up on a linebacker deep. Now, he chose Boston Scott and threw a beautiful ball, and Boston Scott was interfered with. However, Jalen Reagor, the play worked. Jalen Reagor was wide open and would have had just as many yards as Boston Scott. And with his speed that we've heard about, maybe he takes it. The next week, Jalen Hurts hit him on that play. The same exact play, and one guy was covered with a mismatch. The other guy was totally uncovered. But Carson Wentz wants to take the shot, and Jalen Hurts wants to run the offense, just like Nick Foles ran the offense.
Well, I guess that's why the offense has looked, more proficient and more effective over the last 2 weeks. Listen, in 2 games, this kid's thrown for 505 yards. He's thrown for 3 touchdowns. He's rushed for a touchdown, 0 turnovers, okay, except for a fumble, no interceptions, I should say. Mm-hmm. His rating is over 90 for 2 games. Carson Wentz has been struggling all year to get his rating above 71, 72. And to me, that's just not good enough. And he's giving you 169 yards and a touchdown on the ground, Jalen Hurts has. So, the Wentz apologists can be as mad as they want to be. They can get as upset as they want to be. But he's playing with even a lesser line than what Carson had all year. Because, listen, you've got Matt Pryor playing right tackle, Nate Herbig playing right guard, Isaac Seumalo playing left guard, okay, and a project in Jordan Mailata playing left tackle. And Jason Kelce is the only mainstay that's left there, okay? And they went out against the Arizona Cardinals and posted, almost 500 yards worth of offense, okay? Show me where Carson's done that all year. You know, it's not my intent to beat Carson up, but the truth is just the truth. You know,
Well,
and we can talk about the plays, how Doug calls different plays for him, and he rolls him out, and the first game he ran the ball 18 times. Well, let's check that. He took 3 kneel downs. Okay, that brings his number to 15 carries. And if you want to get technical about it, how many times did he take off and run because he had to and created opportunity?
I actually figured it out. So against New Orleans, the run pass differential was 30 to 36. 30 passes, 36 runs. 18 of those runs were by running backs. So it was 18 by the quarter, and maybe 4 or 5 were designed. But in the final analysis, he dropped back 40 times and handed the ball off 18. So Doug hasn't really changed. Last week against Arizona, it was 50-29, but it was really 55-18. It's, I mean, again, it was bad again with Carson sometimes. There was one game where the running backs ran the ball 9 times. That's not acceptable. I believe that was Seattle. That's just not acceptable. But and I'll apologize for Carson a little bit, okay? In his from 17, 18, 19, his offensive line was first, third, and first ranked by Pro Football Focus, which has gotten much better over the last 5 years. He had arguably the best offensive line aggregate in those 3 years. So, and he was really good. His passer rating was something like 96 or 97 aggregate in those 3 years, and he was hurt half the time. If that's who Carson Wentz is, that's not terrible. If he needs a very good offensive line to post nearly 100 passer rating a year, that's fine. Get him some offensive linemen. But to your point, when the offensive line disintegrates, his game disintegrates. He's healthy. There's nothing wrong with him. The big difference, people ask me all the time, what's the difference with Carson Wentz between the first 4 years and this year? The big difference is no Brandon Brooks, no Lane Johnson, Jason Peters is gone, and Jason Kelce is diminished. I know he just made the Pro Bowl, but Jason Kelce will tell you he's not the same guy this year as he was the last 3 years. So if Carson Wentz needs an elite line in front of him to be an elite quarterback, that's okay. So does Tom Brady most of the time. But, it doesn't mean he's horrible, but it does mean that he's not Superman. So he has to, and we all have to do this. In our 20s, we have to realize what we can't do. Mm-hmm. Hopefully he's realizing that.
Well, I think that the best way for the Philadelphia Eagles to find out what they have in Carson Wentz, and a lot of people will say, oh, he proved himself. He doesn't have anything else to prove. No, he hasn't. Okay. He went 7-9 his rookie year. He got the team in position year 2. Then he got injured. He came back. The team went 7-9, 7-9. This year, they're horrible. So what is he proving? I mean, if he was the chosen one, and I think the Eagles made a major mistake when they re-upped him last year instead of letting him play out the last year of his option. I get it. You don't do that with your quarterbacks, but they needed to see that in light of all the injuries and whatnot that he had, that he could get through a whole season before you earmark that kind of money. Okay. But my point is, you got to find out what you have in the guy. I'm not calling for the Eagles to trade him. I'm not calling for him to cut him. I'm not calling for him to do anything, because I think that he has a unique skill set. But I also think that he needs to be in this position where he's challenged. And I want to see if he accepts that challenge or if he wants it all handed to him on a platter. And if he wants it handed to him on a platter, Marcus, guess what? I don't want him to be the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, because nothing in life is handed to you like that. Everything that you get, you're going to have to fight for. You're going to have to earn. Okay. Has he fought through injuries and all these things? Absolutely. Okay. But for the first time in your football career, probably you're facing some competition. Okay. Show me you're competitive. I don't want to hear about, when guys are bearing down on him, he's ducking under him and he's running around making all these plays. Yeah. You know what? That's instinctual. That's fight or flight mode. I'm talking about right now when you're
you're in the midst of a quarterback battle and someone's trying to take what you believe is yours, step up and show, because they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. The Philadelphia Eagles want Carson Wentz to be the quarterback of this franchise, not Jalen Hurts. All he's got to do is show that he's got some lion in him, some dog in him, some fight in him, that he's willing to take what everybody believes is rightfully his. And if he doesn't have it in him, then guess what? He doesn't deserve it.
Well, here's the thing that I don't understand with the whole Carson. It has to be Carson or Jalen. It can't be both, right? Before or in the middle of 2 seasons ago, or at the end of 2 seasons ago, the Indianapolis Colts, Frank Reich, determined that Jacoby Brissett was kind of their quarterback for the moment. And he counts like $21.6 million against this year's cap. Phillip Rivers came available. He was signed for $25 million. That's $46 million at one position, right? People are saying, hey, you can't have too much money allocated to it. The Eagles have $36 million total dollars allocated against their cap next year for the quarterback position. That's $10 million less than the Colts. If, and Howie Roseman has said this, the second most important position on your team is backup quarterback, then I don't care if he's making $50 million and the other guy's making $1 million. You're spending $51 million on the 2 most important positions. If Jalen Hurts was the backup and Carson Wentz was the starter, the numbers would be the same. Almost no quarterback makes it through a season unscathed.
True.
It just doesn't happen very often. You have to invest in your backup quarterback, because I know everybody says, well, you get in December, every game's a playoff game. Well, unless you're 13-1 after week 14, that September 3rd game is a playoff game. Right. The NFL is essentially every week's a playoff game. So every time a quarterback starts, there's nowhere on your calendar that doesn't count until week 16, 15 if you're super lucky. Game 16, 15 if you're super lucky. That's the way the math works. So it's incredibly important to have 2 capable quarterbacks on your squad, and that was the plan. It's just 2 flipped guys. So why is Carson Wentz's feelings more important than Jalen Hurts's? Why is Carson Wentz profile more important than Jalen Hurts? It's about a team. It's about getting the best you can out of these assets by spending this much money on this group of players. Carson Wentz wasn't going to renegotiate his deal to, accommodate the lower salary cap next year. He was going to cost $35 million against the cap. And he's still going to cost $35 million against the cap. And I tell you what, you trade him. I think he's fixable. You trade him, he's going to go somewhere and succeed.
Probably.
And it's going to cost you $36 million against the cap, or $33 million against the cap, or 2 $25 million cap hits if you trade him, a little bit later in the year. It's just madness. There's no reason to move on from Carson Wentz. And I think Carson Wentz needs to digest that, understand it, and grow from it. Grow from it.
Well, the question is whether he really wants to, whether he's able to, whether the self-entitlement will allow him to at the end of the day, Marcus, because that's what it sounds like more than any other thing to me, is that, hey, this is my team. Quarterback has to feel like these are my guys. I heard in on some network today, I'm like, I don't belong to nobody. I'm on the same team as you, and we're out there for the same exact objective. So listen, my needs count for me just as much as yours. My family got to eat just like yours. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to be great just like you. But this whole concept that these quarterbacks are so much more important and so much better than everybody else, it's like it breeds this entitlement that we see.
And fragile, fragile. Like, why can't you get benched? This was kind of my issue with the Sixers. If Joel Embiid comes in fat and Ben Simmons won't shoot, why can't he? Why do they get to play over guys who are in shape and will shoot? If they're going to be insubordinate, if they're not going to do what the GM and the coach tell them to do, it's not that the end game is getting them to be the best player they can be.
Right.
If that takes some sacrifice here to get to here, so be it. That's the way it goes. And they're all young. They all got to learn. We all had to. So I don't know. It's wonderful. I mean, we spent 55 minutes talking about this stuff. So it's great for us.
Yeah.
But it's really a simple concept. You know, you signed a contract, you entered a league that's run a certain way. You signed a second contract knowing full well that things might not be perfect all the time. You go to work, you do your job, and you hope it works out for the best. Who knows? Maybe it's a blessing for Carson Wentz that he didn't play the last 2 games. Maybe there's something physically going on with him that needed to – maybe he didn't even know about it. Maybe he needed this to be checked. We all need to get checked, right? Maybe he needed to get checked. This could be a blessing down the road for him, even though it seems horrible and embarrassing right now. And it could be a good lesson for everyone. You know, it might be a good lesson for Doug. Maybe he should have pulled the plug faster. Maybe it's a good lesson for Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, who Doug will tell you they have no input in how he runs his team. But I know Doug tells us he meets with Jeffrey every week. Jeffrey Lurie is not going to be talking to him about the quarterback play. Even if he doesn't say start Jalen, you know, he's human. He's going to be like, what do you think about this? Well, do what you want. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. So maybe everybody learns from this and everybody gets a little bit better.
Well, I don't want to end the show without talking a little bit of defense. You know, I'm just perplexed that, you know, in the last 3 weeks we faced 4 weeks, I should say, we faced 4 of the most elite wide receivers in the game: DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, and then DeAndre Hopkins. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why Jim Schwartz has allowed these guys to be out there one-on-one and get torched on 3 different occasions. Now I get it. You gave up draft picks and you're paying Darius Slay a lot of money. He's been billed as the shutdown corner. So you're going to take your number 1 corner and put him on the other team's number 1 wide receiver every single down. Okay? Nothing wrong with that. I have no problem with that. But where's the contingency plan when you've got a guy that's 6 foot, 200 pounds, lining up against a guy that's 6'4", 230 pounds? They can run faster than him, and you're going to leave him one-on-one on that guy all game long, and that's the only guy that's beating you? When Devontae Adams is the only guy that's beating you? When DeAndre Hopkins is the only guy that's beating you? Isn't the whole concept of defensive football to take away what you do best? Now, DeAndre Hopkins didn't have a big game in the first half, but when the game was on the line, they went to him again and again and again, and they left poor little Michael Jacquet out there on him one-on-one all day long, okay? Now, why couldn't you just say, all right, we're going to double and take you away, and we might not be able to, you know, might not be able to give anybody else a lot of help. So everybody else, you know what? Tighten your belts, because you guys are going to have to get it done, because we got to stop this guy, this one guy, from beating us. And he has no answer for it. He goes into no games with a secondary plan on how to take someone away, or the plan is to take away their best option and make them beat you with their least option. It drives me crazy, man, especially as a defensive player. It drives me insane.
Well, there are 2 layers to Jim Schwartz that I've learned are consistent. He believes he's smarter than you. Therefore, whatever his plan is has to be better than whatever happens or whatever your solution might be. It's very difficult and he is a smart guy. It's very difficult for smart guys to admit they're wrong. I've heard. The other thing is, he doesn't want to guess wrong. He doesn't want to gamble wrong. He doesn't want to get burned, which is why he doesn't blitz as much as he should. And I get his philosophy is, if I'm going to spend draft picks and millions of dollars on my defensive line, they got to get home. Okay, that's great in theory, but if they're protecting with 6 and you don't have anybody who can man up, you don't have lockdown corners or playmaking safeties, You got to give him help. You got to throw that guy's timing off and at least make them throw the ball quick and short. He doesn't like to admit that he's wrong, and he doesn't like to leave his philosophy. It's really weird because most great defensive coordinators are not bend but don't break defensive coordinators. Mm-hmm. They're pick your shots defensive coordinators. Take your shots. The genius of Malcolm Jenkins and Brian Dawkins, who was so fortunate to cover and just watch them play, is they would, if there are 60 yards of field behind them, between them and the end zone, they would line up anywhere in that 60 yards, play to play to play. They'd be at defensive end one play. They'd be at Raptor the next play. They'd be at middle linebacker the next play. They'd be in the slot covering somebody the next play, or they'd be deep. You just never knew. And they don't have that now. You can't go into a season expecting Jalen Mills to replace Malcolm Jenkins. That's just malpractice. And it's not fair to Jalen Mills, who's willing, but is neither particularly fast, particularly big, or particularly, savvy. That's just suicidal. So it goes to two things for me. I don't know that he thinks he can afford to help Darius Slay or whoever else because he has a converted cornerback making mistakes at safety as his starter. That to me never made any sense. And the drop off, and this is not to demean Jalen Mills. You went from a Pro Bowl Hall of Fame caliber safety to a project, and not a young project, a 6-year project. So I don't know. I've never been a huge proponent of the way Jim Schwartz, especially with so many good young guys out there, of the way Jim Schwartz runs his defense. I think that he's lost them more games and cost them more plays and yardage than other guys have. And if you look down the list, the guys that were underutilized didn't pan out. Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, Jordan Hicks is hurt but didn't play as well, and LJ Fort in Baltimore now. All these guys didn't play as well for Jim as they're playing elsewhere. It's pretty damning. And where would he be without Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, both of whom he inherited?
Well, can you give me? I know we're on the hour. Can you give me 10 more minutes?
Whatever you need. Because
to that point, I want to tee up this video, the turnover where I think Jaquette got the tackle and Roby Coleman, came around and got the strip sack and the fumble. And I break it down. I kind of talk about why it's important that you bring pressure. The bend but don't break mentality, it doesn't fly in Philadelphia. It's not Buddy Ryan. It's not Ray Bob. It's not Jim Johnson. It's not Bud Carson. It's none of that. I mean, so when I watch it, because I'm aggressive by nature, growing up under Buddy in football. But then when you look at the history of the Philadelphia Eagles defense, we don't bend but don't break for no damn body, But we got to sit here and watch every single week our cornerbacks playing 10 yards off the ball, giving up, 7-8 yard outs, and playing man coverage from outside with no safety help inside all day long.
Make them make a play. Put them under pressure, make them make a play. Football is the only sport where there is a philosophy of allowing them to do something and you react to it. In basketball, you apply pressure to the ball as soon as the person receives it. Mm-hmm. In soccer, you apply pressure to the ball. In hockey, you apply pressure to the guy carrying the puck. Why not football? Why not pressure that quarterback into making a faster decision and making the receiver make a better play? Just and do it more, and disguise it and have different guys do it. I watching this defense is like watching paint dry and has been for 5 years.
Hey, it's fear. It's fear. They don't play inside technique because they're afraid of out routes and corner routes where they can't get any help over the top. So you play outside technique and man coverage and blitz coverage, and you give the guy the entire middle of the field to run away from you. He runs 4-2 and you run 4-4. You're going to lose that all day long. Now, I'm not saying live in those types of techniques, but you got to mix it up every once in a while. You can't just line up at 10 yards and quarterbacks look at, oh, you want to give me 7 yards on first down? I'll take that.
The entire offenses are designed to take advantage of that.
It drives me insane. But let's run the defensive video of the turnover, and you can see this is why I always say pressure is the great equalizer for defensive teams, and we just don't pressure enough. We just want 4 guys to pressure. You got Fletcher Cox with 600 pounds laying on him every single play, and we expect for him to be, effective. It doesn't work. You've got to bring more than 4, more than what is it? Something 20 something percent of the time. You just have to, because this is what happens.
All right, I wanted to share this video with you. This clip right here is a turnover by the Eagles. Contributes to a score right before the end of the first half. A pass from Jalen Hurts to Greg Ward Jr. for a touchdown on 4th and 3. But I want you to see the Eagles decided to bring some pressure here. And I just feel like Jim Schwartz needs to do this more often, because it leads to a huge turnover. So you got Roby Coleman coming off the corner down here at the bottom, and you got Michael Jaquette, who's up top on DeAndre Hopkins, coming on a corner blitz. They run a read option, RPO. Kyler Murray pulls it. Jaquette gets the sack, but Roby Coleman comes around the edge and kind of lucks into knocking the ball out of Kyler Murray's hand, and also recovering the fumble. But, when you're not getting pressure and you can't keep the quarterback contained, you've got to figure out a way to, to keep a quarterback like this in the pocket and make him play at, less than 6 feet tall. You got to make him play behind these giants in front of him, make him pull the ball down and make quick decisions. But you see this blitz, really good blitz, 2 guys coming off the edge, nobody to pick up Jaquette at the top. I'm not sure why Kyler Murray just didn't stand in and throw this ball to DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sure he's got a sight adjustment here, but I think he gets caught up looking at the rush, looking at Jaquette coming off the corner here. But just a good play. It is not easy to tackle Kyler Murray in the open field. And Michael Jaquette does a good job of just breaking down, making sure that he makes the tackle, make a short tackle. I always said, when a guy sees you, you're not going to blow him up. The only time you're going to get those kill shots is when the guy doesn't see you. He does a good job of watching the hips here, loses leverage a little bit, but, still makes the play, makes the tackle here. And before Kyler Murray can be ruled down, you'll see Roby Coleman come around and knock the ball out of Kyler Murray's hands for a huge, huge turnover. I think the Eagles had 3 turnovers in this game. Usually that's enough to win you the game. It just didn't work out in their favor this week. But man, big play at a time when the Eagles defense and the offense really needed some momentum here. That's why I say, pressure is a great equalizer. I just don't understand why Jim Schwartz doesn't pressure more often and why he's not more creative with his pressure package. In this right here, I believe this is on a first down play that he actually brings the pressure, and it made a big difference in flipping momentum and giving the Eagles an opportunity to get back into this game.
Now, don't get me wrong, okay? Even though I played for Buddy, I was never a go get him all the time, constant pressure all the time, because we lost games being overly aggressive. But you can't be passive so much that teams anticipate your passivity and game plan it and take advantage of it. Obviously, this play caught them completely off guard, because you can't tell me that if Kyler Murray doesn't read that pre-snap, that he doesn't throw that ball out there to DeAndre Hopkins and him in the open field against, a third-string safety, that's going to be a touchdown. but he was just as shocked as anybody else was to see, Jaquette come off the edge and his ability to actually get him down. You've got to apply pressure. And I just don't understand smartly why he can't do that, why he can't make that transformation.
It baffles me too, because if you noticed on that particular play, that was a blitz and they brought two corners, but they also dropped a defensive lineman into coverage in the middle, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that you're talking about when you talk about creativity. When you're not able to predict what's happening, Kyler Murray is a very young quarterback still. If you run that blitz against Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees, you don't even touch them. Yeah. Not only do you not touch them, like you said, there's a very good chance that that's going all the way. That's a 65-yard touchdown catch and run. But my issue with, and again, the reason I get frustrated with Jim is that he has extremely experienced defensive linemen. He's got green cornerbacks and he's got green linebackers last 2 seasons, but his defensive linemen know what they're supposed to do. And what happened on that front helped those 2 guys get home, because you had 5 guys blocking 2 guys. Mm-hmm. He confused everybody. It worked. It was great. And if you're that smart, you should have lots of those as a package, especially against a young guy like Kyler Murray. Now, if you remember Epps' interception later on in the game in the red zone, I think it was late in the third quarter, Kyler Murray wasn't sure what he saw. And the reason he threw that interception is because he threw it and then wanted to get it back. It wasn't like, Mark Zepps was like, oh, I'm going to be here. Marcus Epps was astounded, and the ball was so softly thrown and so badly thrown because he tried to pull it back, it was hard to catch. You know how those balls are. So that said, by that point, even though they had a bunch of points and they get a few more, Kyler Murray wasn't sure what he was seeing. And that's the cumulative effect of bringing exotic or creative pressures, especially on a young quarterback whose safety valve is his legs. And, I want to see more of it. I want to see more. If he survives this season, I want to see more of it next season. I got to tell you, I'm more encouraged by this defensive backfield after the last 2 games than I have been about a defensive backfield in a long time, even though Malcolm Jenkins was in the defensive backfield, because these guys like to play. Mm-hmm. These quarterbacks want to play. These guys aren't, Ronald Darby. These guys got, I think you used the term earlier, they got some dog in them. And they don't care how much money they're making. They don't care if they play next week. They want to make the play this week right now, and they're having fun. And that's the defense that I like to watch, and that's a defense that Philadelphia likes to watch.
Hey, listen, man, it's all about opportunities with young guys. They're going to make some mistakes, but they're going to make some plays too. And you just have to live with it until they catch up. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I think, competition again, competition. When the starters are out, you have an opportunity, especially late in the year, okay? A lot of these guys, we don't even know their name. They've been on the practice squad. They've been out on the street. We don't know who they are. They have an opportunity to be on the main stage right now with 4 games left and show everybody, not only the Eagles, hey, I can play, because you really don't know if a guy can play until you put him in the game. He can look good in practice all he wants. I've seen it a million times. Look like Tarzan and play like Jane. I've seen it, But at the end of the day, these guys are auditioning. They're not auditioning for the Eagles, but if the Eagles don't want them, there's 31 other teams out there next year that are going to be looking for players who can play. So they're taking advantage of opportunity. And I just love it, man. I love it. Listen, Michael Jaquette struggled, but he made some hell of a plays too. Mm-hmm. And you got to remember, Jim Schwartz put him out there by himself on arguably the best wide receiver in all of pro football. Okay. And that guy's going to get his. You just ain't going to stop him unless you put 2 of you on him. That's just, the fact of the matter. Listen, I know we're over, but give me your thoughts before we run on Howie Roseman's vote of confidence, and then the real bombshell that dropped over the weekend. John Dorsey's been here advising behind the scenes in an executive position. And will that expand into the spring, or is that something that's just, a a consultant type thing.
My contention with Howie Roseman since he came back is that he has to be more inclusive, but no general manager can afford to be pliant. It has to be his team. And I think actually he's been too pliant. I don't think he was really interested in Andre Dillard 2 years ago, who cried during training camp after a fight. I don't think
Wait a minute. So you're of the opinion that the GM should have final say? I
think yes, there has to be a voice. You can collaborate, but Ron Wolf wasn't wasn't deferring to anybody, any consultants. Tom Donahoe, who's with the Eagles now, wasn't saying, well, Tom Modrak, if you think so really, really hard, I agree. No, it's your butt on the line. Just like Doug Peterson, it doesn't matter who's making a play call. It goes through his ears. It's his play call. Right. So I think actually the best thing for the Eagles is if Howie Roseman were to accrue more power. However, I believe that Jeffrey Lurie listens to the radio and listens to, reads the papers and says, well, things haven't gone perfectly, so maybe I should give Howie less. I mean, John Dorsey's not here by accident. Tom Donahoe's not here by accident. These are huge names. These are great. I mean, how do you ignore these guys? I think the team might be better off either with them in power or Howie in power, but not this sort of aggregate, managed by committee stuff. There needs to be a strong voice saying this is what the buck stops here. And I believe Howie would love that, but I don't know that Jeffrey's going to give it to him. And I doubt that Jeffrey will give it to him. I mean, you saw what happened with the offensive coordinator last year. Doug Peterson said, my offensive coordinator's coming back. 24 hours later, 2 years removed from the Super Bowl, the owner fired the offensive coordinator.
So you're of the opinion, because it's public perception that Howie Roseman is the one that's pulling the trigger on all these picks. Andre Dillard, Jay Jaw, Sidney Jones, and everyone feels like Howie has failed the organization from a draft standpoint. They feel like, hey, he does a phenomenal job. I mean, listen, I saw it with my own eyes. What he was able to do after Chip Kelly screwed this team, the way he was able to move pieces and get players out of here and resuscitate the salary cap, I was just completely blown away by that. There's a lot of people that believe that he's a great salary cap guy, but he doesn't know the first thing about evaluating a football player. Do you dispute that?
No, I don't think that Howie's the guy I want to go to the Senior Bowl and go to the snot pit and see the defensive tackles and guards go at it. I don't want him making that determination. I want him listening to the guys who make that determination. This guy's better than this guy, and then making a final decision, or somebody else. But it can't be the diplomacy. It can't be, okay, I hear you, I hear you, I hear you. And the irony is, usually in this situation, you've got the head coach with the big voice. Doug does not have that. Doug doesn't want that big voice. He gives you his input and he says, you make the decision. But at this point, Howie's going back with 4 or 5 other voices in his ear and trying to make the best decision to please everyone. He needs to please Howie. There needs to be a type of player that he pinpoints. And I'll tell you, the type of player he pinpoints, his guy this year is Jalen Hurts. That's a Howie pick. You can tell how he talks about him. He gets giddy.
Well, listen, I would say this. Because I heard that the draft room went crazy when he took him instead of some other people that were there. I would say this: if I'm a head coach, then I want some say so. I know better than any GM as a head coach, an offensive coordinator, or a defensive coordinator, the type of player that I need. Okay. I don't want the GM who's never played football before and maybe even his scouting staff to have the full run of the mill, because you know what winds up happening, Marcus, is that okay, the GM makes the pick. It's my job to coach the team. But if you give me a player that I can't use, you give me a player that I can't develop, okay, and then 2-3 years down the road, you want to take my job because you gave me crap to work with. How fair is that? That's not right.
Ray Rhodes said it first. If I'm going to make the soup, I want to buy the groceries. And there's merit to that. But my contention is I have no problem with Doug Peterson having more input in player acquisitions, or even Jim Schwartz, who I think has a lot of input defensively. My issue is these advisors. We were talking about John Dorsey. We're talking about Tom Donahoe. These advisors muddy the waters that don't need to be muddied. It needs to be more streamlined. And if Doug Peterson says, "Hey, that's my butt on the line. I don't want Andre Dillard. I want X guy. I don't want Jalen Reagor. I want Justin Jefferson," and they get into a clash and they work it out, that's the way it's supposed to work.
Right.
But
okay.
I would say Doug needs to be more assertive, and Howie needs to be more assertive, assuming they have jobs in January, February, or March.
All right. I just wanted to clarify because I got a couple of people on it. It's like, Howie more power? What? So I just wanted to clarify for them so they understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, Howie had incredible power before he lost power to Chip. Then he went to the mountaintop with the Dalai Lama and, watched how, European football teams, worked and came back with all this conciliatory diplomatic stuff and kind of lost his teeth, or was defanged one way or another. Howie now isn't the same Howie of, 12, 13, 10, 11, 12, 13, when he had more power and kind of had the final say. And I'm not saying that's right, but I'm saying there has to be a final voice. There has to be one guiding voice. And guys like, I don't care if it's Dorsey or Donahoe or Andy Weidel or whoever it is, if it's Doug Peterson, if he wants to usurp all the power. But there has to be a final voice, a final say. And it can't be, okay, this guy's getting this guy, but then this guy's getting Hurts, and then this guy's getting Kayvon, and then this guy's getting Hightower. It can't be placating this guy, and this guy. There has to be a vision, And that's what's, Belichick's different, but that's what he does so well and has done so well. And that's what's happened in Arizona. That's what's happened in Green Bay. That's how DK got there. So, you have to have a strong philosophy and a strong voice, and it all goes back up to the top. This has been Jeffrey Lurie's team since 1994. His team, everything that happens, every significant thing that happens, Randall being benched, Rodney coming on, Ty Detmer coming on, Donovan getting drafted, Cobb, all of it goes through Jeffrey Lurie. It's his team. He's at work every day. He is not absentee, and he loves it. So how his team is run, stops at his desk. And I believe he needs to streamline it and just kind of go for broke. Going into this next season, I would love to see Howie back. I'd love to see Doug back with clearer, stronger voices. And I'd love to see, like you said, a competition between Carson, who I think can be a franchise quarterback, and Jalen Hurts, who I think can be a franchise quarterback. What a beautiful problem to have.
Awesome stuff, man. Awesome stuff. Hey, that's our show for today. I want to thank my guest, Marcus Hayes. Listen, man, I tell my guests every single week that time is our most valuable commodity. And I know I said an hour, but I thank you for the last hour and 23 minutes. I know we could talk football till the cows come home, but I appreciate your time, your input. I know that my viewers and my listeners really enjoy, what you have to say. Keep bringing it, man. That's the only way you got to do it. Just keep bringing it. I love it.
Well, you set a good example. Thanks for having me.
You got it, my friend. I want to thank my producer, Tom Schrader, and Derek Stevenson. Be back next week with another great show for you. Hopefully the Eagles can figure out a way to pull out, 2 more victories here. I know you guys don't want to hear that. Some of you guys want a better draft position, but we play to win the game. Okay. And next week, what I'm going to do the next 2 weeks is we're going to have a giveaway after next week's show and the final week, to close out the season. I'm assuming that the Eagles aren't going to make playoffs. So we'll do back-to-back giveaways next week. And like I said, I have another great show for you guys next week. As always, take care of each other and be good to each other. But most important, love each other. Peace. I'll see you guys next week.